Hi everyone, and welcome to this Earned Media webinar with Generation Progress. My name is Emily Leach, and I'm the Senior Press Associate at Generation Progress, and I've been in the press and media space for about 3 years now. This presentation was put together by my predecessor, Giovanni Rocco, and my boss, the Generation Progress Comms Director, Charlotte Hancock. And the subject of our webinar today is earned media and how to get it. So the first thing that I wanted to do is start off with a quick kind of definition of what earned media is. So basically, earned media is when people or organizations are sharing or talking about your work based on the merit or the relevancy of your content. This is different from paid media, which is when you're paying someone to promote or publish your content, or owned media, which is when you are publishing or promoting that content on your own channels, which could be your website, your blog, or your social media. One of the most important things that I wanted to get across in this webinar is that earning media coverage is all about telling a good story. So before you put together a press or a media strategy, you should sit down and think about what is the story that you want to tell, why are you the best person to tell it, what gives you that authority, and 3, who is your audience? Who do you want to tell the story to? We often talk to young people who aren't totally sure that they are the best person to tell their story yet, but most of the time we find that they are. And so we work with young people all the time from all different backgrounds, education, and experience levels, and ages to tell their stories to the audience that they want to tell it to. We've also found that personal stories are extremely compelling. Legislators can introduce all of the bills that they want, but sometimes it takes personal stories to convince people and to convince them even that change is really necessary and that situations are urgent. So the first thing that we're going to be walking through right now is how to write and pitch an op-ed, and then we're also going to talk about letters to the editor. So an op-ed is a great way to share your story in order to educate or persuade people. These are usually something that's kind of relevant to something else that's happening in the news, and the goal should be to mix in what your opinion is with analysis, data, and kind of your personal story as the support for that opinion. It's also good to be mindful of what's already been printed. Sometimes, when there's a big news event, a lot of people might be trying to share their personal stories or connection. So it's a good idea to get a sense of what else has been published so that you can make sure that yours is distinct. If you are interested in learning how to structure your op-ed, Generation Progress has actually created an easy kind of worksheet to help you work through that. Basically, the idea is that you want to lead with your main idea and your local connection or personal connection, and then summarize your main idea with 2 to 4 strong points before ending with a strong call to action. So you can use this little worksheet to write down all of those main points before you get into the drafting stage. It's super helpful. So we wanted to walk through a quick example of what a really strong op-ed looks like. This one was published by a former Generation Progress intern, PD, and it was actually published in Teen Vogue. But not all op-eds that we work with people on can or should be published in Teen Vogue. We often work with people to get their op-eds placed either locally or in a publication that's specific to their issue area. And sometimes that can actually help to get the op-ed to the people that really need to see it. But this op-ed from PD, which is really great, was about the criminal justice system and kind of how it's failing young people specifically. And PD opens his op-ed with a really personal connection to the criminal justice system and talking about, his own kind of almost brush up with it. And his main point is basically that the criminal justice system is failing young people, and it's resulting in problems that affect young people for the rest of their lives. He backs this up with, his 3 main pieces of support, which are that he knows he's lucky that he wasn't caught by the criminal justice system. Point 2, which is that he knows that his life would have been different if he had been. And point 3, which is that criminal justice records follow people for the rest of their lives and can be extremely damaging. And then the other thing to keep in mind when you're writing an op-ed is that you want to back up those pieces of support with data and policy solutions, so something to look forward to and something to kind of press for in terms of activism. If you're not really sure where to look or where to start with getting data and policy solutions to use in your op-ed, you can visit the Center for American Progress's website or Generation Progress's website, and there are lots of different kind of progressive policy solutions that can help you get started. And then every good op-ed should end with a strong call to action. Basically, what should people do? Should they call their legislators and talk about a certain bill that's going through the House or the Senate? Or should they get out there and participate in a protest or a march? Basically, how can they get involved? How can they help you if they end up agreeing with your opinion? Letters to the editor are kind of like a cousin of the op-ed. They're usually much shorter, like less than 200 words, and they're responding to something specific. So they're not just responding to an issue or a news event, they're responding to an actual article or opinion piece that was published in a newspaper. So when you want to go about getting your op-ed or your letter to the editor placed in a publication, the first thing you want to do is write a short and sweet note to send to the relevant editor at the publication. This note should briefly mention why you're emailing and why you're the best person to be presenting this op-ed or this letter to the editor. What's your connection, basically? And then you want to talk about what you're talking about in terms of news in the op-ed or the letter to the editor, and what the point of the piece is. One note is that I usually attach this piece in the body of my email rather than in an attachment, because some publications have policies against opening those types of attachments. And then in terms of events and earning media around those, this can be a rally or a protest or an office visit. It can be a little bit more difficult sometimes to get people to actually show up to an event, just because a lot of news people are a little bit constricted by where their office is, or the number of editors that are on a specific beat. So it's good to keep in mind that you should be getting in front of people as early as possible. The first thing that you want to do on that note is build a press list. So this will be an updated list of contacts of reporters, editors, and producers that often cover the subject of your event. And then in reaching out to them, you'll want to include either your press release or press advisory that kind of go along with that event. So a press advisory is a little bit shorter than a press release. It's something that just kind of summarizes the who, what, when, where, and why of the event. And it's usually sent out around a week before the event actually happens, and as a follow-up a few days after. And then a press release is a little bit longer. It's structured a little bit more like an article that includes some more background and often includes a quote from someone who's participating in or leading the event. So if you have a speaker that's showing up, you'll want a quote from them included, and then if your group is putting it on or you are putting it on, you'll want a quote from either you or the leader of your group. And this is kind of presented in a little bit of a newsier way. And you can also send press releases in advance to news people if you make sure to mention that it's being sent under embargo, which means that they can't release it until the event actually happens. And then it's important to note that we should all have kind of a realistic sense of what the news landscape looks like when you're going into either pitching anything from an op-ed to coverage of an event or a piece of news. Most local newsrooms are incredibly overworked and understaffed. There can be as little as 3 people in a room at some publications. And reporters are often, juggling multiple jobs, working cameras and audio, and also going through lots of different requests in their inbox. And they might not always have time to get back to you. But I generally think that it's important to continue following up with people, because sometimes requests do get lost in their inbox, even if they are relevant to the reporter. So it can be worth sending a quick personal note explaining why you think that they're a good fit for your news or your op-ed, and just asking, for any thoughts or feedback that they have. I usually stop after about 3 follow-ups, because at that point you might just be bugging them and you might be ruining a relationship that you could potentially strengthen in the future. So I think usually 3 follow-ups is a good place to stop. But then once someone does respond to you and you work with them on a contributed piece or on coverage of one of your events, you definitely want to maintain that relationship and kind of keep them in your circle. So usually what that looks like is just continuing to keep them up to date on any new news that you have or any information that you can share with them, while also being cognizant of their time and making sure that you're not just sending them a note every time your organization wants to get a piece of coverage. So keep in mind what that person covers, whether or not you think this will actually be interesting to them, and just, being a conscientious contact for them that they will want to keep in touch with going forward. So yeah, I kind of touched on this earlier, but you'll want to keep trying. So sometimes this story or this op-ed isn't a good fit for a publication or a person, but you might have something to offer them in the future. So it might be something where you could even go back with a different news hook, like, hey, this story, might not have seemed as relevant to you in my last email, but here's why, like with this new news happening, I think you might want to reconsider it. And again, just as long as you are being cognizant of their time and making sure not to overload them with emails or phone calls, a lot of times that can help reporters to make new connections and maybe see a fit for something that you're working on. And then the other thing that you might find that you need to prepare for are interviews. So these can happen over the phone, on a podcast or a radio show, or on TV even. So Generation Progress has actually created another handy little worksheet for you to use to prepare for interviews. So it kind of looks like this that's showing up on the screen, and also you can see it here. It's called the envelope exercise, and the idea behind the envelope exercise is that you can do it on a piece of paper that's as small as the back of an envelope. And so for the envelope exercise, you want to start with things to remember. So this, on a TV interview, say, might be as simple as, I always say or I sometimes forget to smile, and I want to remember not to do or to do those things. They also give you a place to list out the other people or guests that might be appearing on your show or panel with you, who the reporter or host is, so you can kind of casually work their name into conversations to make it sound as casual as possible, and any talking points that you have. So that could be, these are usually really important for interviews because you'll go in and you'll want to make sure that you make the point that you want to make and get that across to the people that are watching. So that could be, your organization's talking points in general, or it could be responding to the specific subject of the interview. It just depends on the context of your interview. And then you'll also want to have some sort of validation or third-party data to pull out of your back pocket during the interview to help make your points a little bit stronger. I also think that one really handy thing to have before you're going into an interview, especially if it's going to be a little bit contentious, or if you have an opponent who disagrees with you that's going to be participating in the interview as well, it's great to have what you would say in response to the best point that your opponent might make. So if they're going to go up there and say, climate change isn't real because X, you can say, why it actually is real. And, just have like a response that you're ready to pull out of your back pocket in the moment and really make your case. So some examples of that. But thank you all so much for sticking with me through this and for joining our Earned Media webinar. As I said, my name is Emily Leach, and I'm the Senior Press Associate at Generation Progress. If you have any follow-up questions, or if you are ever working on something where you're trying to get earned media and you want some advice, feel free to email me at eleach@americanprogress.org. Thank you all, and have a great day.